the girl kidnapped by bandits. Every single day, she was abused by the bandits who held her captive. Her life had become a living hell, one that made her wish she were dead. Just as she was about to give up and end it all, Mia was suddenly taken to a strange room outside. There were no vicious bandits here. Instead, a kind-looking old woman walked in carrying a tray of food. The old woman told her that she had paid to buy Mia back from those men. Then she urged her to eat while the food was still warm. Under the old woman's care, Mia ate her fill and changed into fresh clothes. Feeling as if she'd been given a second life, Mia swore on the spot that she would repay Auntie May for saving her. But Auntie May told her there was already a chance to repay that debt. She led Mia to the front of a brothel. It turned out the only reason she'd paid to free Mia was to sell her into the brothel for profit. From that day on, Mia was forced to take clients every single day. At first, she'd rather die than give in, and she fought back with everything she had. But all that earned her was beating after beating. The despair seemed endless. Eventually, with her fellow captives urging her on, she had no choice but to accept her fate for the time being. After all, only by staying alive could she hold on to any hope. But on the very night she finally agreed to take a client, a swordsman suddenly appeared. He forced the customer to back off. Then, his voice trembling, he called out Mia's name. In that instant, Mia's memories came rushing back. Memories that felt like they belonged to another lifetime. Before the bandits took her, she'd lived in a quiet, peaceful village. Back then, she'd had two childhood friends. One was Lucas, who was determined to pass the imperial exams. The other was Marcus, who dreamed of becoming a swordsman. Both of them liked her, but secretly, she'd had feelings for the handsome, easygoing Marcus. Unfortunately, the bandit raid had shattered all of those sweet dreams. Now, meeting again after everything that had happened, so much had changed between them. Mia's first instinct was to run from it. She panicked and denied who she was, telling him he had the wrong person. But Marcus said he could never mistake her for anyone else, that she was one of a kind in this world. Hearing those gentle words, all the pain and injustice she'd swallowed for so long finally found a way out. She collapsed into his arms and sobbed uncontrollably. Soon after, Marcus paid to buy her freedom. Her past didn't matter to him at all. He promised to give her a home. Marcus brought her all the way to Lianxue town. Here, no one knew about her past. She could start her life all over again. Mia's heart swelled with joy, and she began to dream of a happy future with Marcus. Soon after, Marcus took her to meet someone else. It was Lucas, the young scholar from their village. Back when the bandits attacked, everyone had scattered in different directions, but Marcus had never given up searching for his old friends. Now, after everything they'd been through, the three of them were finally reunited. They gathered together and raised their cups to celebrate. Mia excitedly began planning out their future. She said Lucas, with all his learning, could open an academy, and Marcus, with his incredible swordsmanship, could open a martial arts school. She turned to Marcus with a smile, asking if he liked the idea too, but his expression darkened. He said he still had important business waiting for him back in the capital, and there wouldn't be time for him to run a martial arts school. Once this cup of wine was finished, he'd have to be on his way. That was when Mia finally learned what Marcus had been through all those years. After she'd been taken by the bandits, Marcus, unwilling to accept it, had chased after them for miles. He'd nearly been killed himself. A swordsman passing by had saved his life and taught him swordsmanship. To repay that debt, Marcus had spent all these years staying by his master's side. But whenever he found the time, he would go out searching for his two old friends. Now that he'd finally found them, it was time for him to return and report back. The home he'd promised to give Mia turned out to mean something else entirely. He was giving her to Lucas, who loved her just as deeply. Marcus turned to Lucas and told him solemnly that Mia was the sister they both cherished most. He made him promise to treat her well from now on. Mia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She didn't want to make things difficult for Marcus, but when it came time to say goodbye, she couldn't help grabbing the hem of his robe. She made him promise that every year, whenever he came to visit, he'd bring her some candied fruit. Marcus nodded and gave her his word, and so Marcus returned to the capital. Soon after he left, Mia and Lucas went ahead with their wedding. After marriage, the two cared for each other and lived together happily. Just as Mia had pictured, Lucas really did open up an academy. Every year, Marcus kept his promise and came back to visit, always bringing her favorite candied fruit. Years passed peacefully like this. During this time, Mia became pregnant, but for some unknown reason, she soon suffered a miscarriage. Lucas blamed himself deeply for what happened, and became even more caring toward Mia. Somehow, they learned that Mia had once worked as a prostitute. They secretly whispered that a woman like her was never worthy of Lucas. Whenever Mia walked down the street, she felt like everyone was staring at her with judgment in their eyes. Her mind grew more and more unsteady. Things only got worse when she heard that Lucas's academy had been affected by the rumors and had to shut its doors. At least for a while, the guilt inside her reached a breaking point. One day, while she was out buying vegetables, Mia overheard someone gossiping about her again, calling her a shameless, immoral woman. Suddenly, Mia walked toward the person like she had lost control of herself. She picked up a kitchen knife and killed the person who had insulted her. Mia was arrested on the spot for murder and thrown in prison. When Marcus came back for his next visit, he hadn't even reached Lucas's house before he heard the news that Mia had killed someone. He rushed straight to Lucas, desperate to find out what had happened, but Lucas was already completely drunk and unconscious. Marcus couldn't shake his doubts. No matter what, he refused to believe Mia was capable of murder. He decided to sneak into the prison himself to see her and find out the truth. However, when he saw how weak and exhausted Mia had become, anger filled Marcus's heart. He directly broke her out of prison and took her back to the capital. Even after leaving the prison, though, Mia remained dazed and distant. The only time she seemed even a little normal was when she was by Marcus's side. He desperately wanted to know what had happened to her, but he was terrified of upsetting her further, so he never dared to ask. Instead, he brought in a spirit healer named Tao to examine her. On that particular day, after finishing up his duties, Marcus came to sit with Mia as he always did, trying to comfort her, but just as he raised his teacup to drink, the cup in his hand was suddenly shattered by Tao. Tao told him that Mia had put poison in the tea. Marcus refused to believe a word of it. Tao searched carefully through the tea leaves and, sure enough, found traces of poison, but she explained that Mia hadn't been the one to poison it. It had come from a spirit known as the Shadow Blade. Tao quickly explained what the Shadow Blade was. Legend had it that if you watered a corpse's bones with human blood, it would grow into a plant capable of controlling people and making them kill. At the top of this plant grew a single fruit. When the fruit ripened, it produced a pair of spirits known as Shadow Blades. These spirits were always born in pairs. If one was placed into a person's eye, and the other into someone else's, then the first person could control the second and force them to kill. Mia's condition meant that someone had placed a shadow blade into her eye. Otherwise, why would she have killed her neighbor? Why would she have tried to kill Marcus, the man who had done so much for her? But who could hate Mia enough to do this? To manipulate her into killing and then pin the blame entirely on her? What was really behind it all? And how had they gotten their hands on something as rare as a shadow blade in the first place? After explaining all this, Tao acted immediately. Using a secret technique, she destroyed the shadow blade lodged in Mia's eye. At last, Mia returned to normal. Tao explained that these paired spirits never survived alone. Since she had just killed the one inside Mia, the other one out there was bound to die as well. All they needed to do was find out whose eye had suddenly gone blind, and they'd have their culprit. Tao added that she despised the shadow blade more than almost anything, because it could only be used on someone you trusted completely. In that instant, everyone in the room thought of the same name, Mia's husband Lucas, the same man who happened to be Marcus's closest friend. Marcus couldn't accept it. He rode through the night straight for Lianshui town, determined to get answers from Lucas himself. Before long, the group arrived at Lucas's front door. They knocked, but the only one who came out to greet them was a young maid named Chloe. Marcus immediately asked her whether Lucas's eyes were all right. Chloe told him that when Lucas left that morning, there had been nothing wrong with his eyes at all. Marcus let out a heavy sigh of relief. But even if Lucas wasn't the culprit, whoever was behind this had to be someone extremely close to Mia. Chloe mentioned that Lucas had been suffering from headaches and had left early that morning to see a Dr. Shen. Marcus decided to head out and search for clues on his own, leaving Tao and the others behind to wait for Lucas to come home. But night fell, and Lucas still hadn't returned. Even Marcus hadn't come back yet. Sensing that something was wrong, Tao decided to go looking for them herself. Following what Chloe had told her, she made her way to Dr. Shen's clinic. Dr. Shen said Lucas was still receiving treatment. Marcus, who had arrived that afternoon, was still there waiting as well. Watching Dr. Shen's calm, composed expression, Tao couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The moment she stepped into the room, the floor gave way beneath her, and she fell into a deep pit. When she opened her eyes again, she found that she and the little monk Momo were both tightly bound by spider silk. On a pile of corpses nearby, a shadow blade plant was growing, and on an enormous spider web farther away, Lucas and Marcus were hanging there, but the most shocking part was that Lucas's left eye had gone blind. He was the one who had used the shadow blade to control Mia and make her kill. What Tao couldn't understand was why Lucas, the mastermind behind it all, was now tied up right alongside them. When she demanded an explanation, Lucas scrambled to defend himself. He claimed the whole thing had been a scheme orchestrated by Dr. Shen. He said Shen had deceived him, manipulated his mind, and left him unable to control his own actions. That was how the shadow blade had ended up planted in Mia's eye. He insisted, all against his will. Still, Tao couldn't understand what any of this had to do with Shen. Just as her confusion was deepening, a soft, childlike singing voice drifted through the air. The one singing was Chloe, the maid, and in her hands she was holding a strip of human skin. Tao recognized it instantly. It was the legendary skin-shedding spell, which meant the real Dr. Shen had died long ago. Chloe had been impersonating him this entire time, but why would she do something like that? Marcus, now conscious again, struggled desperately, trying to break free and kill Chloe. Chloe only smiled calmly. She said that although she was a spirit, the person Marcus should really be furious with was Lucas. Then Chloe slowly began telling a story. When she first met Lucas, she'd been disguised as Dr. Shen, treating his wife after her miscarriage. On the surface, Lucas seemed deeply concerned for Mia, constantly preparing soups and medicine for her. But the observant Chloe soon discovered that Mia's miscarriage hadn't been an accident at all. She'd found traces of an abortion-inducing drug in a chicken soup that Lucas himself had prepared. Chloe couldn't understand why Lucas would poison his own wife's soup and cause the death of his own child. This made her extremely interested in Lucas, so she disguised herself as a maid and took a position in Lucas's household. Watching him closely, it didn't take long for Chloe to find her answer. One day, Lucas had been in high spirits, planning to cook crab for his wife, but the moment he saw Marcus arrive from the capital, his expression darkened instantly. Then he reined in his hatred, put on a cheerful face, and walked over to greet them both. He hid it perfectly, never once letting a trace of it show in front of Marcus or Mia. Only when he was alone did his true hatred and rage come pouring out. Lucas hated himself for befriending the wrong person and marrying the wrong woman. He hated Marcus for coveting his wife. He hated his wife for the feeling she still held for Marcus. His obsession made him believe that the two of them were the ones who truly loved each other. He even believed they'd already been having an affair behind his back, and that the child Mia had been carrying wasn't even his, but Marcus's. Watching all of this unfold, Chloe felt she was seeing the darkest side of human nature laid bare. She found it fascinating, wanting to see things spiral even further. Chloe presented Lucas with the shadow blade and let him make his choice. Without a moment's hesitation, Lucas used it on Mia. Hearing this, Marcus felt something inside him die completely. He had been Lucas's closest friend. He had always kept his feelings for Mia in check, always stayed within the bounds of what was proper, never once crossing a line. He never imagined that in his best friend's eyes, he could be seen as something so despicable. He could accept Lucas misunderstanding him. What he couldn't forgive was that this misunderstanding had ended up hurting Mia, but his words only fueled Lucas's resentment even further. Lucas screamed at him, telling him to stop pretending to be the noble one. He said that back when Marcus had handed Mia over to him, he should have known something was wrong. Everyone else had known Mia used to be a prostitute, and he'd been the only one kept in the dark. Every time he thought about it, a wave of hatred surged up from somewhere deep inside him. A hatred for Marcus that had settled into his very bones. And even after he'd finally managed to convince himself to accept everything and move forward, he discovered that even though Mia had married him, the person she truly loved in her heart had always been Marcus. Mia was by his side, but her heart had always belonged to Marcus. Lucas couldn't take it anymore. His rage had completely stripped him of any reason left. He broke down and screamed in fury, but in the very next instant, that same rage and hatred consumed him entirely. His body dissolved into a pool of blood right there on the spot, and Chloe gathered it up. To the very end, he never forgave either of them. Perhaps some things were doomed from the very beginning. If Mia had married Marcus back then, maybe the three of them could have stayed the best of friends forever. But Lucas forgot one thing. From start to finish, the choice had always been his to make.